Today marks the third day of jury deliberations in a trial that never should have occurred in the first place. Now, it's possible that by the time you listen to this, the verdict will have already been decided and announced. But as I say these words, they are still in deliberations. New York, of course, is prosecuting Daniel Penny for the crime of defending a subway car full of passengers from a violent maniac named Jordan Neely. On May 1st of last year, Neely, who at the time had an active warrant out for his arrest for assaulting a woman on the subway, boarded a subway car in Manhattan and announced that he wasn't afraid to go to prison and that, quote, someone is going to die today. Multiple people on the train later said that they had never been more terrified in their lives. Penny then put Neely in a neck restraint, and eventually Neely died. New York Medical Examiner's Office says that Neely died of neck compression, but a Texas-based forensic pathologist retained by the defense says that New York's experts are wrong and that the Neely, in fact, died due to a combination of factors, including a sickle cell crisis caused by exertion, schizophrenia, and his use of synthetic marijuana. So it's a George Floyd-type scenario all over again. Now, we've been through the outline of this case many times before. We've been following this case closely, as you know, ever since the incident first occurred on the subway. And I believe it is one of the most important murder trials in American history. And so at this point, the details don't bear repeating. If you've been listening to the show, you know all of them. It's well established that a functioning, sane society would be giving Daniel Penny an award for doing what the state refused to do, which is to protect its citizens from an unstable, lifelong criminal with dozens of prior arrests. But as these deliberations stretch into their third day, it's becoming clear that at least some people in New York disagree. This is not an easy verdict for these jurors, apparently. It should be, but it isn't. And just by itself, that's a very stark commentary on where things stand right now in our nation's largest city. The fact that Daniel Penny wasn't acquitted in 2 seconds tells you that, for all intents and purposes, the right of self-defense has been nullified in New York. You can act to defend yourself and others in the most obvious manner imaginable, and yet still face a very real prospect of spending up to 15 years in prison. So unfortunately, no matter what happens from here on out, and hopefully they come back with not guilty, but it cannot be a truly happy conclusion at this point. I mean, the happiest conclusion is that after deliberating for days and days, they find him not guilty. It's obviously what we're praying for. But we couldn't even call that a happy conclusion at this point because, number one, the case was brought in the first place. And number two, the jury had to deliberate about it for days rather than going back and, talking it over for 2 minutes and maybe having a lunch break and then coming out and saying, yeah, of course, not guilty. Now, the more you look into why exactly this case was brought and how it was conducted, the more it becomes clear that this case really isn't about Daniel Penny or anything he did. It's about something called restorative justice. And you don't have to look very hard to see that restorative justice, in practical terms, is a system of race-based punishment. So here, for example, is a video that's been going viral the last couple of days of the prosecutor in the Penny case, a woman named Daphne Yoren. She's an assistant DA in Manhattan. And in this clip, she's discussing a previous case from 2019 in which she explains her decision to go easy on a 57-year-old black man who killed an 87-year-old Asian college professor while robbing him at an ATM machine. Now, Yoren says that she felt sorry for the 57-year-old black man, and so she decided to pursue manslaughter charges instead of felony murder. Watch.
I had a murder case where the defendant did not intentionally kill the victim. He went into an ATM on the Upper West Side and tried to rob an individual. Unfortunately, it was an older individual. He was 86. And in the course of the robbery, he fell to the ground. And as a result, he died. This is, under the law, a felony murder, which is akin to intentional murder. However, when I first got the case, I learned, I took the time to learn about the defendant. And it was a strong case, so it wasn't about a whodunit. I knew immediately who did it. I could prove it. I could take it to trial that day and win it. But it wasn't about that. It was that the more I learned about the defendant and his life and the circumstances, the kinds of things that Jarrell was talking about, that one should take into account the trauma of that individual, I really felt incredibly sorry for him that he had gotten to that point in his life where he felt like there was no other choice but to commit this robbery.
So Yoren is very concerned about the emotional trauma that the killer supposedly suffered, but she's much less concerned with the actual trauma that the 85-year-old man suffered, trauma which killed him. And therefore, she came up with an arrangement that would reduce the killer's potential sentence from 25 years to life imprisonment all the way down to 10 years. And he won't even serve anywhere near the full 10 years. He's eligible for parole next year, in fact. Now, to be clear, because it's not obvious from that clip, the victim in this case didn't slip on a banana peel while he was being robbed. This wasn't some freak accident. The 87-year-old victim was hit in the back of the head by a man 30 years younger than he was. We're talking about a violent felony that occurred. There was clear intent to cause serious and potentially fatal injury at a minimum. So what might explain Daphne Yoren's sympathy for a murderer who killed someone while committing a felony, even as she demonstrates no sympathy whatsoever for Daniel Penny? Unlike the ATM murderer, Daniel Penny didn't set out to commit a violent felony. He didn't attack an innocent elderly man so that he could steal $300. Instead, he responded to the actions of a violent felon who was terrorizing everybody around him. But Yoren's sympathies are strangely absent this time around. Now, online, there are reports that Daphne Yoren is a lesbian who's married to a BLM activist, and that's not particularly surprising. What we're seeing in this case is a clear example of race-based restorative justice. The ATM killer was black, Daniel Penny's white, so he's not entitled to sympathy. He's not entitled to the right of self-defense either. He needs to be punished solely on account of his skin color. That's what this is really about. And that's why throughout the trial, the prosecution has repeatedly referred to Daniel Penny as the white man. So here's one exchange from the courtroom, for example. This is the DA asking questions and a witness answering. Quote, question, when you saw the white man holding on to Mr. Neely, how were they? Answer, his arm was on his neck. Question, where is Mr. Neely's back with respect to the white man? Was Mr. Neely laying on top of the white man? Answer, like this. He had him held. The doors opened. Question, did the white man's arm ever leave Mr. Neely's neck? Answer, not that I saw. The racial emphasis was so overt and so over the top that Penny's lawyer made reference to it when it was his turn to cross-examine the witness. He began, quote, the prosecutor kept calling him the white man. I'm going to call him Danny. Is that okay? The witness replied that it was indeed okay. Now, the defense has also sought a mistrial over this, which of course the judge denied. In New York, Soros DAs have no problem reminding jurors that white people deserve to be punished, while black defendants should get out of jail as quickly as possible, even when they bludgeon elderly Asian men to death. The prosecution has used a bunch of other dirty arguments too. For example, they used Penny's interrogation footage to portray him as callous and indifferent to Jordan Neely. Here's part of that footage.
Daniel? Yep. I'm Detective McCarthy. I'm Detective Medina. I actually work here. This is where you're at right now.
Cool.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Okay. Very good. Very good. I'm doing well.
Yeah.
You served in the Marine Corps now?
I did, yes.
I served in the Marine Corps.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Got my little death before the sun.
There you go. Nice, man.
What you doing? What was your MLS in the middle?
I was in 0351.
I was an 0331.
Oh, cool. Michigan. Yeah,
Yeah.
weapons platoon.
Yeah.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
I was not military, so I don't know what that stuff is.
It's like another language.
3rd Battalion, 6th Marines.
Okay, there you go. 36.
96 to 2000.
Nice, man.
Two med floats. Did my thing, and then I ended up here. Now I got close to 22 years here now, man.
Good pension coming up.
Yeah.
I was on there. I forget what stop it was at, but some guy came in and he's like, whipped his jacket off and he's like, I'm gonna kill everybody. I can go to prison forever. I don't care. I don't do this. At that point, I looked to the person next to me like, hey, just hang on to this phone for me. I had my headphones in and took it off and just kind of like grabbed him from behind because he came in just to because he was acting like a lunatic, like a crazy person. So, and he was rolling around the floor. Yeah, absolutely.
Intoxicated, high.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that K2 that they're smoking, pushing people in front, like these people are going crazy. So
he seemed off his lid, basically.
A little bit, yeah.
Now, a key point here is that at this point during the interview, Daniel Penny did not know that Jordan Neely was dead. He also thought that law enforcement was on his side, so he spoke to them without a lawyer, which is always a huge mistake. Then he proceeds to describe Jordan Neely as a crazy, unhinged crackhead, which is true. And now a big part of the prosecution's closing argument is that Daniel Penny in this interrogation wasn't using nice words to describe Jordan Neely. They're saying that he shouldn't have called him a crackhead or referenced all the other violent thugs who pushed people in front of subway cars. That's their evidence that Daniel Penny should go to prison. That he wasn't telling the cops that Jordan Neely was a talented Michael Jackson impersonator. He wasn't mourning the BLM martyr. He was saying things about Neely that were true. He was revealing, perhaps, that he has a negative opinion of violent crackheads, just like everybody else on the planet who isn't a violent crackhead, or who isn't apparently a New York DA. This is an injustice that's so undeniable that the city's mayor, Eric Adams, has just come out once again to essentially say that Daniel Penny is getting railroaded. He didn't use those exact words, and he says he can't comment on jury verdicts and so on, but he makes it clear that this prosecution is completely corrupt. He also criticized the media for portraying Jordan Neely as a Michael Jackson impersonator instead of a career felon. Listen.
You should look at that on a multi-faceted approach of everything that's wrong with the system that we're facing. One, look at the photo that they used to show the victims. It seemed like it was a young, innocent child, right, who was brutally murdered, and it gave that impression. When you looked at the photo that was being used, it wanted to set up in the minds of people that we were dealing with a young, innocent child that, just a Michael Jackson intimidator that, was just brutally assaulted. Then you look at the complete failure of our mental health system, right, a complete failure from the days of closing psychiatric wards and having those who needed help just turned over into the street. Now, we're on the subway where we're hearing someone talking about hurting people, killing people. You have someone on that subway who was responding, doing what we should have done as a city and a state of having a mental health facility. Those passengers were afraid. I'm hoping that the jury will hear all the facts. Based on all the facts that's laid out, a jury of his peers would make the right decision. And I don't want to prejudge that. I'm just looking at all the facts that are involved here and what we did to get to where we are and what we're seeing. Because that could have easily been a case where you saw 3 innocent people murdered on our street 2 weeks ago.
So Eric Adams says that the media portrayed Jordan Neely as a Michael Jackson intimidator instead of an impersonator because words are very challenging for the mayor of New York. We can't expect too much here from the leader of the biggest city in the United States. But you do have to give Eric Adams some credit for being the only Democrat in the entire country to contradict the official narrative on this thing, even if he's doing it as tepidly as he possibly can. In New York, this is what passes for bravery at the moment. Pretty much no one else is standing up for Daniel Penny. There are BLM mobs outside the courthouse every day. They're so loud that jurors can apparently hear them inside the courthouse, 13 floors up. It's like the trial of Derek Chauvin all over again. Everyone on the jury knows that. They all know that if they acquit, the city will probably burn, which makes this whole procedure totally invalid. But again, whether the jurors ultimately bow to that pressure or not, the fact that the jury has taken so long to reach a verdict is already a pretty clear sign that the right of self-defense doesn't exist anymore in New York City. There are no guarantees in New York that you can defend yourself or others, even when a violent felon storms your subway car and vows to kill people. Instead, especially if you're white, your only guarantee is that a Soros DA will try to destroy your life. That is the reality that the Daniel Penny trial has laid bare. It's an utter travesty of a prosecution. And until all of these DAs are removed from office, we can be sure that it won't be the last one. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.